Yeah, so I really appreciate the time. As Jim said, my name is Shannon Pope, and I'm Director of Customer Success for CTERA. And I'll be taking you through a demo of the edge appliances, or the edge, the way that we access data from the edge. And as LeRon kind of went over, I think he did a great job explaining what the global file system is. Obviously, we're trying to take data that is typically scattered in an environment or on certain silos and centrally store it in one directory structure, one global file system. So if you're doing that, whether it's on-prem in your data center or in the cloud or in our SaaS model, then you really need to have a way for the users to have fast access to the data, right? Low latency, fast access. And we do that a number of ways, and it's three ways, as LeRon told you. The CTERA edge filers, which give you SMB or NFS presentation of the global file system, right? They're caching appliances, and he went through all of that. We have the CTERA drive. This is an agent that you would put on our on a host, whether that's a laptop, Mac, Windows, Linux server, and this is an agent that it basically does sync and share. So kind of think a similar experience to a OneDrive or Box type experience. And then we have web and app access to the data. So this is if you want to log in directly to the global file system through either a web interface and upload, download data, do collaboration, Office 365 integration, or an application that can go on a mobile device. So in my demo, I'm going to walk through what each one of these look like from an end user experience. So not necessarily the management interface, but really looking at it more from what is the experience of someone that is accessing the things on the edge. And I'm going to start off with the edge filers. So as we've already talked about, the edge filers will typically replace Windows file servers or a NAS appliance. So with any of those types of technology, you're looking at these devices sitting in maybe a data center, but even more so maybe at a remote office, a headquarters in multiple locations, multiple countries, and you're mapping a drive to those. So if it's a Windows world and it's SMB, you're creating a map drive, whether that's using DFS namespaces or just a script that you log on with. The other way is, of course, mounting the drive with NFS. So as you expect, in this environment, I have two gateways or two edge filers. And I'm going to focus in on the first one to start off with. So the first edge filer I have set up, LeRon took you through, it's just a UNC path, obviously. So I'll go into one of the shares and look at my images share. With our appliances, like LeRon was stating, they mostly do intelligent caching. So if you just take them out of the box, setting in the caching mode, they'll connect to the Active Directory. You'll migrate data using the migration tool that Simon's going to show you, pulling in all the ACLs and metadata. But then if you're doing intelligent caching, then the device is going to download and cache files based on access time. And when it needs to clear up space, it will evict the full copy of the file and turn that into a stub or a pointer-based file. Now, when you want to be in more control of what data sits on there, then you can use data pinning. So you can pin certain folders or subdirectories or all the data if you want down to a certain edge filer. You might want to do this in certain applications like Jim mentioned the Carlisle group. They're very heavy spreadsheet users. So when you open one spreadsheet, it's linked workbooks. It pulls up 10 other spreadsheets. Or AutoCAD, when you pull up AutoCAD, there's collateral files that need to be pulled up. Those collateral files or other types of files, those are files you'll want to keep on the gateway or on the edge filer all of the time. So perfect candidate for pinning. Another good candidate would be if the edge filer is way out. We have a customer that makes explosives. So all of their locations are very far out, high latency, low bandwidth links. In those cases, they want the data pinned down all the time. So in my first example, the gateway 01, the data is pinned. So if I look at the mountain, all the files look normal looking file. The size 49K.
Hey Shannon, how can you tell that the data is pinned versus intelligently cached? Is that some attribute of the data that we can't see here, or?
That's the setting. That's a setting that you do in the edge filer itself. So in the edge filer, you can expand the global file system and specifically check which folders you want to be pinned down.
And so,
when you're,
I guess,
and Ray, just to answer your question in terms of the user indicator, there is a default overlay on the icon. If it's a stub, you will see a gray X mark that indicates that this is a file that doesn't live locally on disk, and it will be recalled when you double click it. Whereas you see on the left, for example, you don't have that overlay because the file is already hydrated on the box.
I got you.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So,
And the metadata is replicated to every edge appliance in the global space, or is it
correct.
just the metadata for that particular edge filer? That's
No,
used?
the stub files will contain the metadata, including the permissions, last access, that sort of thing. So that gets replicated even if the file's not fully cached down to the device.
And just Shannon, to add there, as far as the metadata and how that gets distributed, yes, if you kind of take it out of the box and connect 1,000 filers to the same global namespace, all 1,000 are hearing about everyone's changes. But as LeBron indicated, we have a construct that we call zones, and that allows us to segment how that metadata gets distributed. So if you do want to have every site kind of on its own, you can define that as part of the configuration of the system. And for those that do need the ability to collaborate, you can just put them in the same zone. And that would enable that metadata exchange between them.
All right, thanks.
Right. Yes. So in my example, the edge filer gateway 01, that one has the data that's pinned. So you can see the file is the same on disk. And in gateway 02, we have this set up in intelligent caching. So in this scenario, you can see the same file is 49K, but size on disk is 0. But the important thing is to note that, to the user, it looks like the data is there, even though it's got a slight gray X on it. All they have to do to access the data is double click it. Once they do that, then that file has now been cached, and the size on disk now matches what the size is of the file. Couple important things to note. One, the experience that I'm having now, this is of course in Windows. Macs and just inherently have some issues with caching intelligence. This is above and beyond CTERA. This is just any of the industry type wide. One of the things that we have is something called Mac Assistant, which allows you to enhance the experience of a Mac user. So this gives, so for example, these little X's and such in normal Mac use do not show up. When there are indexing files, sometimes this is causes the devices to download the files. Thumbnails are slower. Spotlight searches are slower. So we've developed a tool that allows the Macs to connect to the edge filer directly and depend on the edge filer to do some of those processing, whether that's thumbnail generation or indexing, which really enhances the experience. And also the Mac devices can see that these are cached versus stub files, right? So which is very important. In either case, these devices are connecting to the global file system in real time. So when I make a change on these devices, so I'm going to go into one of the other folders. When I make a change on one of these devices, it's typically going to show up on all of the devices. But the way that we sync, so if I add a document to gateway 01, it's now going to sync that data, deduplicated and encrypted to the global file system, which is going to in turn make it appear on the other device. So these devices are globally are constantly syncing bidirectionally with the global file system. And as LeBron was explaining before, as we update the files, or let's say this new text document gets updated, let's just rename it. Then what it's going to do is only send the deduplicated or changed blocks to the global file system, which is going to in turn push that change down to the other device or any other device that happens to be syncing with it. And so what we do is we keep virtually every version that's created for the first 24 hours, then we consolidate that into snapshots, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and so forth. And what that's going to do is give you it's going to give you an offsite copy of the data, but it's also going to give you the ability to roll back to a specific point in time for data restoration, ransomware remediation, and things like that. Also, the bidirectional synchronization in real time gives you the ability to have site-to-site collaboration, but also you can put multiple edge filers in one location if you need to do load balancing or fault tolerance or high availability using something like DFS namespaces. So these edge filers and the way that they sync is obviously very important. One of the added things that we can do is, again, if I was showing you kind of the management piece of this, I would go into the ability to manage all of these edge filers centrally, push out firmware, push out configuration. This is important if you start getting to tens, hundreds, even thousands of edge filers. And you can also restore data back to certain versions and to certain points. But users can also do this as a self-service. So if I want to, for example, right-click on this versions and go back to yesterday at, we'll say 5 o'clock p.m., it's just a matter of clicking and restoring. And the administrator doesn't even have to be involved in this process. So you'll see the date stamp go back to yesterday, and it already has. And then you'll see that be synced over to the other device as well. So from that's a quick overview of the edge filers. So let's talk about the agent now. When you want to do Satera Drive, which is what we call the user experience, the agent, the sync and share, when you install it, you'll get a little cloud icon. You'll also get various configurations that you can work with. This can all be white labeled. We have some customers that you don't even see the word Satera. The icon's different, the background's different, giving them a sense of adoption within their own company. The agent can do two things. It can do point-in-time backup. We have some customers using that. That's not a widely used case, but it's available. And we have a real-time sync and share, just like kind of the edge filers do, right? It's a caching-based synchronization that takes place. If you're only licensed to do the sync piece, the cloud drive piece, then you don't see backup and vice versa. When you do install it, you do get a cloud drive icon. So again, this looks familiar to other products that are out there. And when I expand it, you can see that I have my files, which would be the idea of your own My Documents home directory, and I can see other folders that have been shared with me. So in this case, I have that same. I'm going to go back over here to the images. This is again on Gateway 01, and I'm going to go into the same folder within my shared drive or my cloud drive, right? So in this case, I have similar icons. You would expect to see that. There's the mountain that we saw earlier. You can see it has a cloud icon. And if I right click on it and look at properties, this is the same as what we were seeing on Gateway 02. And when I double click on it, you'll see the cloud drive below request that file and sync it. Now that file has a green check mark and it has been fully cached to the device.
Just a quick question there.
Sure.
When we're talking global namespaces, I've consolidated, say, 20, 30 big filers. How do I sort of sort my way through that zoning wise or whatever so that my end user doesn't have 20, 30, like the millions of file shares that I used to see when I would go browse on the network? How as an end user do I find my share in the cloud drive, for example?
Right, so the administrator can present those shares to the end user, either through a policy or a script or with permissions. So you're, as an administrator, in control of what they see under shared with me.
Okay, and then the second question is, what's the rough ratio of, I know this is always a tough one, data to metadata? Because obviously anyone running Cloud Drive is going to have that metadata for all those files locally.
Right. So with the metadata, I would say they're at 4K. A lot of times they show up as 0K, but 4K I would say would be maybe the largest. And you are in control of the cache that a user has. So that was kind of my next point, where you as an administrator can say, I only want Satera Cloud Drive to take up 10 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes. Depends on what the policies are, and you can present those policies to a user based on Active Directory groups, users, host name, machine type. So there's lots of ways that you can kind of cut that.
Okay.
The important piece is that with the caching technology, you're able to present a 100 terabyte share, 10 terabyte share, whatever, to a machine that only has maybe 50 gigabytes of free space. And your users at home, or home office or whatever, collaborators can use those files without having to take up the disk space. So good question.
Just as on a related note, we're looking at the multi-tiering question. If I've got an edge appliance, because I like the idea when you mentioned someone at home with their laptop and they're a power user. They've got one of those cute little edge appliances with the 1 terabyte NVMe. That obviously can present either a sharing interface, so an SMB protocol share, or it can also be the step in between the central core for caching for the cloud drive as well.
Well, it's designed to be kind of the gateway or the edge filer function within a home, right? So within the home, you would have an SMB mount point that you would use.
Okay, so they'd be primarily used as a mount point rather than as the stepping stone for the cloud sync, which would talk directly to the cloud. Okay.
Correct. It kind of takes the place of this agent. So you probably wouldn't have you could, but you probably wouldn't have the agent and that small device. Most likely you would have one or the other, but you could certainly. That way when you detach and go into an airplane or something. And then the next piece I want to show is the web interface. So with the web interface, we can authenticate users based off of single sign-on for military multi-factor authentication. We can also use ADFS or something like that. So we've got a lot of different ways we can authenticate users. And it's going to go ahead and log in and show just for a moment. But this is if you're logging directly into the global file system in the web. So in that scenario, then you're seeing the same type of interface as the cloud drive was on the agent. My files shared with me. I can go to the NY data, which we've already been working with, the images. With our product, you can easily upload and download files just by simply dragging it over to the device. So pretty straightforward. You can also share data. This is very important. You can do collaboration. So if I want to copy this file, I can create a public link. I can decide what the expiration is for that link, copy that, paste it into a email or instant message or something like that. And then I can go one step further and do collaboration on the folder itself. So if this was a project folder or something and I wanted to collaborate with somebody externally, all I have to do is invite that person by putting in their external email address, right? So you as an administrator can control, all types of aspects, what types of files can be shared, what domains can be shared with, what people can actually share files. And then all of this is, of course, audited like crazy, and you can even turn this off. So just a unique thing. But the really cool thing is that, in most platforms, you have to decide, is this going to sit inside my enterprise, or am I going to share this with someone externally? It's going to sit into it. It needs to sit on this file server. If I'm going to share it externally, we've got to move it into Box or OneDrive. Now my permission structure is broken. Now my end users that work on the same project, they have to go to another place. So with Satera, you can pull all these things together, right? So with the same global file system, you're sharing folders with multiple sites using the edge filers. You're also doing the agent so people at home can work, and you can also collaborate with people externally, all within the same platform without having to move the data from one to the other, still maintaining control and the security of all of that. Somebody had asked about Office 365 integration. Office 365 integration is done at this web level. So at this level, we would connect to an Office 365 server, and you would simply be able to edit it within the web UI, just like you would with Office 365. So with this, multiple users can be in the same file, accessing the same time, use a web interface, and so forth. So pretty straightforward. And then the final thing that I'll say is we do have a mobile app as well. I'm not going to show it today due to time, but it really does everything that the web application can do except from your phone. And we have people like insurance companies that maybe will take pictures of damaged buildings or accidents, building companies that take pictures of various stages of construction. And all of that integrates in seamlessly within the rest of the platform.